Some of you have been studying English for a long time. Apart from the English language itself, what other things do you need to know? We answer that in this episode and give some advice to Spanish speakers who are living and working abroad. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello, and if you're a new listener, you're very welcome. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And with nearly 50 years of teaching English between us, we're going to help you improve your English and take your grammar, your vocabulary, your pronunciation, all aspects of your English up to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm not bad, Craig. I'm not bad. I was feeling a few aches and pains. You know, my joints, my articulations were getting a bit stiff from being confined to home. But now that the government is letting us walk a few hours a day, they've eased the restrictions. They've made it easier. My body is beginning to relax a bit. So feeling a bit better than before. And how are you?
Yeah, exactly the same. I'm really happy that I'm able to go out a little, walk around, do some exercise. But the problem is, well, it's not a problem, but the window of exercise that adults have for sport is 6 in the morning to 10 o'clock. That's too early for me. And in the afternoon or in the evening, it's, 8 o'clock until 11 o'clock, where everybody goes outside. So it's really, really busy in the area where I live. So at the moment, I'm going out very carefully in the evening, but I think I need to wake up early, wake up at 6 o'clock, get outside the house at 6:30 to do exercise. But you're lucky you've got Coco, so you can take Coco for a walk when you like.
Anytime. And as you can imagine, I avoid those hours you just mentioned where everybody can go out. I avoid them like the plague.
Like the plague? What does that mean?
Como la plaga. What would you do with the plague? Stay away from it. So if you avoid something like the plague, there's no way, Jose, you're going to go near it. For example, at 8 to 11, no. I walk Coco from 7 to 8.
Yeah.
Nobody there. Yeah. Then at night, sometimes I walk them about 10:30, but I try and wait. If he can wait to go and do his necessities, if he can wait to 11 o'clock, better, because then everybody's back home. As Craig says, the whole world and his wife goes out from 8 to 11 o'clock in the evening.
I can imagine poor Coco sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed, waiting for you to take him for a walk.
Yeah.
First this week, let's begin this week with an audio message from Jose Ignacio, who is from Córdoba in Argentina.
Hi Reza, hi Craig. My name is Jose Ignacio. I'm from Córdoba, Argentina. I have been studying English for the last 5 years in different English courses. But in 2020, I decided to study by my own. So I was looking for different tools to do it. And I would like to tell you that listening to your podcast was the best tool I have found. Of course, I also try to read, write, and speak, but I feel that when I started to listen to your podcast every night, my fluency has increased. So I suggest to all of the listeners do it regularly. And the second message I wanted to say is that I started to learn at the age of 30 years. Before of that, I didn't know any word in English. So for all people who think that it's impossible to learn English as an adult, I would like to say that we can do it. The consistency is the key. Thank you very much for helping me. I'm going to continue listening to you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, Jose Ignacio, for your message. It's really good to hear from you. What do you think, Reza? Any comments on Jose Ignacio's message?
It was a very good message. He had very good pronunciation. There was a couple of little things we could maybe help you with, Jose Ignacio. I think you confused two classic bits of vocabulary that people confuse. On my own and by myself. I think you might have mixed them up. I think you might have said by my own. Yeah, but it's on my own or by myself. Or you could say on your own or by yourself, on her own, by herself, etc.
Another small confusion, Jose Ignacio, was with the words fluency and fluently, the adverb. You said my fluently has increased, but you needed the noun fluency. So my fluency has increased. So now you are speaking more fluently. So fluently, the adverb describes the way you're speaking, and fluency is the noun. It's the thing that has increased. So well done that you're speaking more fluently. We're very happy for you.
Another little thing we could improve, perhaps, Jose Ignacio, is you said at the age of 30 years. We wouldn't say that. We might say at the age of 30 and leave out the word years. Or you could say when I was 30 years old. Don't forget that word old. It's not correct to say when I was 30 years. You have to say 30 years old. Yeah, I know the word old on its own means viejo, the opposite of young, but it's different when we say years old. It's just an extra word you have to put in. So the baby is 2 years old. Obviously, is not very old. It's a baby, yeah? The baby is 2 years old. The grandmother is 70 years old. So you should say when I was 30 years old.
Another common mistake that many Spanish people make is the translation of la gente. Todo la gente. Todo la gente. How do you say that in English? Well, many Spanish speakers say all people, but we wouldn't say that. Native speakers would not say that. We would say everyone or everybody. And it's third person. So everyone likes chocolate, for example. Or everybody in my street goes to the park. So remember that. Toda la gente is everyone or everybody.
One other little thing, Jose Ignacio, you said thank you for help me, but it should be thank you for helping me with ing. There's a very simple explanation for that. The word for, F-O-R, for, is the preposition. And if you put a verb, such as to help, after a preposition, it must always be ing. So for helping, for reading, for writing, for traveling, for listening, or to helping, by helping, with helping, from helping, any preposition followed by a verb, it's ing form of the verb.
And well done, Hogne. Well done, Jose Ignacio, with a bad Scottish accent. And well done, Jose Ignacio, for studying English. Even though you think you may be getting old at 30, believe me, you're not. As someone who's getting rather too close to 60 to be comfortable, that's not too old. And there are two expressions that are contrary to each other. You're never too old to learn is a popular expression. You are never too old to learn. Or you can't teach an old dog new tricks. What does that mean, Reza? Can you teach Coco anything new?
No. Well, it seems I can't. He refuses to learn anything new unless there's something in it for him.
Like a treat.
So I try to teach him something. No. And I say, well, look, what about this biscuit? I hold a biscuit up. And suddenly, again, he has the mind, of a teenager. And he can't wait to learn. But if there's nothing in it for him, if there's no reward, he can't learn. So let's say it's difficult to teach an old dog new tricks, but not completely impossible. If you're prepared to bribe, sobornar is possible.
So yeah, I mean, dogs are like us. We need motivation. And if you have the motivation to learn English, then I don't think it matters what age you are, how old you are. It doesn't really matter if you're motivated to learn. And if you are motivated to learn, we would recommend you try a one-to-one teacher with our sponsor, italki, Italki. Italki is a website you can go to find a teacher and learn English or any language online. So we are lucky enough to have italki sponsoring this podcast. We've also used italki to learn French in Reza's case and Spanish in my case. So we've had experience with the service, and we're fully confident that we can recommend this service to you for your English. Go to the website, find a teacher, try it out, test it, and please let us know what you think, because we really appreciate your feedback so that we can pass on your experience to the listeners. Now, if you do decide to test italki, they're offering a $10 free credit when you sign and pay for your first lesson with italki. And to take advantage, to take advantage of that offer, go to inglespodcast.com/312, click on the italki link or the image of italki, and that will take you to the page where you can get the $10 credit. And Reza and I would like to thank italki very much for sponsoring this podcast.
Craig, we have another audio message. This time it's from a Brazilian called Carlos, but he's living in Australia.
Hello, Hessa. Hello, Craig. My name is Carlos. I'm from Brazil, but I'm been living here in Australia for 10 or 11 months now. And when I came, I was searching some podcasts to help me learn faster the English language. And I found your podcasts, and I've been using your podcasts to learn English for 8 months, I guess. And I guess I heard more than 100 podcasts. I'm not sure, but I think so. And I'd like to say thank you. I'm a biologist from Brazil, and I teach it in the last 4 or 5 years, and I know how difficult it is to share the knowledge, especially in your case because you are not seeing your students, but your work is awesome. Congratulations. And I'd like to suggest a subject is more or less like things beyond the English language, because I've been feeling this living in Australia. I have a lot of things beyond the language, like stress, like work. When I feel tired, I can't speak, this kind of thing. Thank you so much. Good day, mate.
Good day, mate. Really nice to get your message over there in Australia. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for your message, Carlos. It was really good to hear from you. And in your message that was very, very good, there were one or two things that you could improve on. You said, I was searching some podcasts. Remember the preposition for. You were searching for some podcasts. It has the same preposition as looking, and it's similar meaning. You're looking for something, you're searching for something, searching for. Any other points from Carlos's message, Reza?
Carlos, I'm not sure if it was the audio. Maybe I misheard you, but I think you said a word, teached. I teached. That word doesn't exist. The past of teach is taught. I taught. But that wouldn't be right in your sentence either, because you should have said, I've been teaching for 11 months. So you started in the past, up to now, and you're going to continue in the future. That has to be present perfect that has to be present perfect continuous. Have been plus ing. So I've been teaching for 11 months.
And one thing I also noticed was there's some use that you had, Carlos, of American expressions and vocabulary. I think you said awesome, which is more common if you're an American English speaker. And also, I guess, I don't know if you agree, Reza, but when I hear I guess, like I guess it's going to rain tomorrow, or I guess I'll go for a walk after lunch, wouldn't we in the UK say I suppose more than guess? Would you think that I guess is more a US expression, American expression?
Well, this is an extremely relevant question, Craig. And we haven't talked about this question before. This is happening spontaneously. We're talking about beyond the English language. Where I come from, we're more likely to say I guess than I suppose.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because I come from Ireland. And I think in Ireland you'd hear I guess a lot more than I suppose for supongo in Spanish. So in Ireland, actually, it is very common to say I guess. But I've noticed that English people from England tend to say I suppose more. So maybe in that respect, Ireland has been more influenced by American English, I guess.
So if I said to you, for example, can I phone you tomorrow at 8 a.m.? You are more likely to say I guess so than I suppose so.
Yep.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. I sometimes say suppose.
Uh-huh.
But in a more informal conversation, I think I'm more likely to say I guess. Yeah, I use both. Let's say I definitely use both. But I think it's more an Irish thing and an American thing. Whereas in England, you're more likely to say I suppose. But this is exactly what we're talking about today. Things that just go beyond the basic language. Things which are very, very hard, if not impossible, to find in a textbook.
Exactly. That's what we're looking at. And thank you very much, Carlos, for your idea. We have touched on this idea before on this topic. If you go to episode 263, we spoke about integrating into British culture. That's inglespodcast.com/263. And we also spoke about working abroad. If you are a Spanish speaker, a native Spanish speaker, and you're working in an English-speaking country or any country that does not have Spanish as a native language, then go to inglespodcast.com/303 and listen to those. They will help you, we hope, with acclimatizing and getting used to your new working and living environments.
All of this reminds me of an old listener who's been listening for a while, Alberto from Australia. Remember him?
Good day, Alberto.
All right, mate. So, Carlos, you might be interested that Alberto, who's from Spain, I can't remember which part of Spain, but I know he's Spanish. He's also been living in Australia for a while. And he, in previous communications with us, he spoke about integrating into Australian culture, actually, which was very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. What Carlos's question, I think, is focusing on specifically is English outside the classroom. In other words, if you're learning English, then you go to formal classes and you have a textbook perhaps, or maybe you're studying online with italki and you're working at grammar, you're learning pronunciation, you're learning new vocabulary and expressions. But there are things that are connected to a language and a culture that you do not learn in these organized English courses. So that's what we want to look at now. Now, one thing that occurred to me when I thought about Carlos's question was body language and gestures when you communicate, and they change from country to country. I think the gestures and body language here in Spain is very different to the body language and gestures that I used and I saw when I was growing up in the UK. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, they're different, and they generally use them more.
Here in Spain, yeah.
Here, would you say they use more gestures? Yeah. Most Mediterranean countries, Spain is one of those. Spain, Italy, Greece, all those countries.
One example that comes to my mind immediately is when you're turn taking. Because in the UK, when you're in a meeting, especially of more formal, perhaps business meeting, or you're with people that you don't have a good, close relationship with, body language is very important to signal when you want to speak or when you don't want to be interrupted. You could put your hand out, or you could put your finger up, or you could move forward a little bit. You could just lean in, which means put your body forward slightly to show that you want to speak. I don't think that will be so obvious in Spain. I think you just have to start speaking and speak over the top of somebody else.
Yeah. And as for gestures, Here's a bit of weird trivia for you. Did you know that in Australia, many years ago, the thumbs up, putting your thumb up, used to mean something entirely different to other English-speaking countries? Did you know that, Craig?
I did not. What did it mean? Because the thumbs up means okay, good, everything's fine. Yeah?
Yep. And in fact, we use it as an expression. I'm going to give you the thumbs up means I'm going to give you permission or say it's okay to do something. Well, in Australia, many decades ago, giving someone the signal with your thumb up meant get stuffed. Quétate in Spanish. Quétate in.
Lárgate.
Yeah, lárgate. I don't like you.
Wow.
Something equivalent of giving the middle finger, which is, I think, pretty universal, which everybody understands. In Australia, they used to use the thumb for that.
Do you know what it means in India?
No?
Well, I'm not sure now, but when I traveled around India for the first time, way, way back a long time ago, in the 1980s, I think it was, before Coca-Cola was popular in India, because Coca-Cola was very late to the Indian soft drink market.
I know what you're going to say.
You know what I'm going to say?
I guessed it.
They had a fizzy drink, a drink with gas, a fizzy drink called Thumbs Up. So when you went to a kiosk or a bar and you wanted something similar to Coca-Cola, you just put your thumb up. You didn't say anything. You put your thumb up and they gave you a Thumbs Up Cola. And that was the Indian brand of Coca-Cola.
Do you know what? You've just reminded me something, Craig. It's lovely to hear that anecdote from you because it's reminded me of something from many years ago that I hadn't thought of in 40 years. And you've just reminded me of it, of visiting Pakistan.
Yeah.
So Pakistan's got a lot of things in common with India, a lot of products as well. And I remember there somebody putting their thumbs up and me saying, "Whoa, what do you mean?" Like, and they're like, "What, don't you understand? You want a drink?" It's like, "What the thumbs up?" And they said, "Yeah, no." And I went, "Yeah, okay, yeah." I was just a kid at the time. And they came back with a 7-Up.
Yeah.
So thumbs up, 7-Up. It was. They thought it would be universally understood that I was referring to a fizzy drink.
Interesting.
So bizarre, yeah. I remember that because then it kind of became like a fun thing. Like every time I wanted a drink, then I kind of put my thumbs up, and that meant, yeah, get me a drink. And Craig, we're talking about exactly the 1980s. We're talking about the early 1980s when I was there. So yeah, maybe they still do it. I'm not sure.
In fact, if you are curious about Reza's connection with Pakistan, we have had a question from a listener who's asked Reza to speak a little bit about his background and his connection to that part of the world. So that is a teaser. A teaser is something that hopefully makes you want to listen in the future to a future episode. If Reza agrees, we are going to speak about. Is that okay with you, Reza, that we speak about that?
That's fine. I'd love to. It's going to be complicated.
You've spoken about it before, but somebody has asked a few questions to go deeper into more details. So we've got that episode to look forward to in the next few weeks.
You'll be bored by the end of it, I can tell you, because I'll have to mention Pakistan, India, part of my culture as well, the United Kingdom, Ireland. I'm a bit of a strange mixture. So prepare yourself for a long and possibly boring episode on that.
And if you have any questions for Reza, then please send them in. We'll give you the email address at the end of the podcast. Another thing that Carlos mentioned was stress and feeling tiredness, and how to deal with that, how to cope with being stressed and tired in a foreign language. I mean, that affects me because even though my Spanish is not good, it's quite bad considering all the years I've lived here. It gets a lot worse. It gets worse when I'm angry, when I'm stressed, when I'm feeling very, very tired. All I want to do is change to English. Does that happen to you?
Yes, it does.
How do you deal with it?
I just try to avoid conversation with people.
You just keep quiet. You don't say
I just try and get away from people. If they're determined to speak Spanish, which is understandable in Spain, but I feel really tired, I don't want to, I just try and get out of the conversation. you know,
No, no, me too.
because
Yeah.
it just really drains me. It takes all the energy out of me.
I listen more, especially if I'm in company with Spanish speakers and I'm the only English speaker there in the group. Then I listen more and I speak very, very little, and I nod my head and smile and agree with everybody and just listen to the conversation, because sometimes I'm just too tired to think of speaking in a language that's not my native tongue.
And Craig, is it just me and you? Because I know you've said this before, or do you think it's all English speakers that we think that many Spanish people speak really fast? So whenever you're feeling tired, it's quite hard to hear everything, because I find I kind of have to catch up a few seconds afterwards. When I'm tired, my brain is like about 2 or 3 seconds behind the voice. You know what I mean? I just can't keep up with people.
Yeah, and if I'm tired, sometimes I understand what I'm hearing, and then I think of something to say. But when I go to say it, the topic's moved on, and they're speaking about something different, and I'm 2 or 3 minutes behind the conversation. That sometimes happens. But yeah, it's a problem, Carlos, and all we can do is just find these little tips and tricks to help us manage the situation. So what I do if I'm really, really tired is, if possible, I switch to English. And if I can't concentrate, then I just sit there and I listen and just let the language go over my head without reacting to it.
In fact, whenever you're learning, I would generally say, if possible, Carlos and everybody, if you know you're tired or stressed, that's not a good moment to try and learn too much. You can maybe learn a bit, but as Craig said, in a very passive way. So you're tired, you're stressed, but you want to improve your English. That's the time to be listening to a song, watching a film in English. It's maybe not the time to be looking at, a website on complicated grammar. You know what I mean? So choose what you do when you do it, right?
And also, if you are in that situation where you're with a group of English speakers in the same room or socially meeting with English speakers, focus on the intonation more than the grammar and the vocabulary. If you're trying to learn, just focus on the music of the language. Try to notice when the voice goes up, when the voice goes down, when they use different ways to communicate their feelings through the intonation and the music of the language. One of the last things perhaps you learn when you learn a foreign language is humor and irony and sarcasm.
Yes, for all languages, because of course things usually aren't that funny if they're too obvious. It's the things that you have to think a little bit about which tend to be really funny. So the fact that you've got to think a little bit about it means it's going to be harder for you because it's not your language. So that is why funny things, humor, are generally harder for foreigners to understand.
I've lived here for more than 20 years and I still prefer English humor to Spanish humor. There are many things in Spanish humor that I appreciate and I find funny, but not everything. And even though I feel very comfortable with the language now, I still don't quite understand some aspects of Spanish humor. So don't expect suddenly one day to find English humor very, very funny and very attractive. It might not happen even after many years.
I'm curious to know if there are many differences between the sense of humor in different Spanish-speaking countries, like Spain, Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, Cuba. Do you think there's much difference? What do you reckon, Craig? Do you reckon they have a very different sense of humor?
I think they do have a different sense of humor, and in my experience with people I've met from different countries and also traveling around in the countries, the sense of humor I most find similar to my sense of humor is Argentina, because I've had Argentinian friends abroad and I spent a lot of time with Argentinian people. Maybe that's the reason. But I really identify with Argentinian sense of humor more than Spanish sense of humor, actually. I prefer their sense of humor. I don't know why. I can't explain it. It's just a feeling I have.
Yeah. And you'll notice that as well in English, that American humour is not exactly the same as British humour, which is not exactly the same as Australian humour, etc. And all these things are very difficult to fully understand. They're not easy. Slang and colloquialisms is an important aspect of language, and you can find out a little bit about them in the classroom, but not much. Not much, to be honest. It's not something which is given a lot of attention. And there's a good reason for that, because to use slang and colloquialisms out of place could get you into big trouble. It's better to play safe on the whole. So if you're in a formal situation or a serious or delicate situation, it's probably better to be excessively formal and correct than slangy and use lots of colloquialisms, because nobody ever really got into a lot of trouble for being too formal in life, whereas people have got into big trouble for being too informal with language. Would you agree, Craig?
Absolutely. And the same could be said for the next thing on our list, swear words. Those bad words that you hear a lot of native speakers using in very informal situations. If you're not absolutely sure how to use swear words, when to use swear words, and also the intensity of the swear word, because some swear words are not very offensive, but others, if you say them in the wrong context to the wrong people, can be very, very offensive. So is it worth taking that chance? I think you have to be very, very careful and be very confident before you use slang and swear words in a social situation.
Yeah. Just to give you an example, think of a Spanish swear word, cabron. Can I say it? Cabron? Oh, there, I've said it. I guess we can because it's an English show.
You can say it then.
We said it.
You're capable of saying it.
Now, I've lived in Spain long enough, Craig, as well, to know that that word can be highly insulting. In a heated argument, when people are really angry, particularly if they don't know each other, you say that and you could get a very, very, very strong response.
Yep.
But on the other hand, it can almost be a compliment, a good thing to say cabron to somebody in Spain. For example, imagine there's a competition or a game of cards or something like that in a group, and the one person wins or they get a really good result. And you say in Spanish, "Ay, que cabrón." But it's almost like saying, "Oh, I envy you." So the same word can be a terrible insult, or it can be almost like saying, "Oh, you're lucky," or "I wish I were you." So it happens in Spanish. You can imagine it happens in English as well. You've got to be really careful exactly how you use these swear words. If you're not sure, don't use it. Only use it if you absolutely know what you're doing.
That's very good advice. And one last thing before we move on, on slang and colloquialisms, very much depends obviously on the country you're in and the area you're in. For example, in Australia, they have short words, slang words for longer words. For example, barbecue would be barbie. They would put an IE on the end of words to make them shorter, and that's their slang. Or if someone said to you, "Do you fancy a cold one?" You might not a cold one? What's he talking about? A cold one? Not many people realize that's a beer. That's "Do you fancy a beer?" So it really depends on the country, your surroundings, depending on the slang and colloquialisms. So you need to learn the vocabulary on where you are. You need to begin from scratch, from the beginning, if you change countries, and learn the colloquialism and the slang from that area, from that part of the country.
Another aspect which is quite hard to teach somebody in a formal situation is small talk. Yes, there's a word called small talk. It doesn't mean using short words. It doesn't mean talking to people who are not very tall. It means talking about unimportant things just for the sake of talking, just to talk. So imagine you meet someone in a lift, in an elevator, as they would say in American English, and you say, "Oh, windy day today, isn't it?" You don't really care that it's windy. It really doesn't mean a lot to you. but you feel you should say something. So you talk about the weather, for example. Windy day, isn't it? Another one would say, oh, yeah. Oh, I put my washing out today. Good day to dry them. Just for a bit of conversation. That is small talk. And certain languages and cultures tend to use certain themes. The weather is fairly universal. It's very, very popular in the UK, but in most countries. And other things, maybe talking about the news, Craig, that could be small talk, couldn't it? As long as you don't say anything controversial, right?
Yeah, just keep it safe. Keep on very neutral subjects that are not controversial. My opinion, it's a bit silly, small talk, but it's necessary. It's breaking the ice. And some people are very good at this. Reza, for example, is someone I admire who is very naturally good at small talk. I mean, Reza's very good at being relaxed in social situations and making small talk. I'm not. I have to work at it. And the way I do it is I like asking questions. I like to try and get the other person to speak if possible. So asking questions about neutral subjects is a very good way of getting small talk going.
Craig, there's an old cliched phrase, and it's kind of used only these days in kind of humor in like sketch shows because it just doesn't have any meaning. But apparently, many, many decades ago, people in England and people in the UK used to start conversations, small talk with, "Oh, nice day for it." I don't know that expression.
Nice day for what?
Exactly. It's just so meaningless. "Oh, nice day for it." Have you ever heard that? It's just so funny. It has absolutely nice day. Craig said it. Nice day for what? And how on earth you can best answer that? I don't know. Nice day for it. Oh yeah, I'll say. It doesn't have any meaning. Can you imagine? Buen día para eso, no? And you go, sí, te digo yo. It has no meaning at all. But apparently, many decades ago, people used to start conversations with that small talk.
Yeah, but it's silly when you walk into a lift in August in Valencia, or you're waiting in a queue in a shop and there's no air conditioning in August in Valencia, and a complete stranger says to you, "Que calor hace?" Like as if they're surprised that it's hot in August, and that's just because people are sociable and they like to speak and make contact, and you have to say, "Oh yes, it's really hot today, isn't it?" Even though it's August. Yeah, exactly. We mentioned before about different areas and countries and different slang and colloquialisms. Obviously, there's also different kinds of English depending on where you are. There's British English, there's American English. Carlos in Australia speaks a variety of English, Australian English, South African English. And of course, this reflects in the vocabulary, as we said, different expressions like good day, mate, as Carlos said in his message. There's different pronunciation and even different grammar, isn't there? There's lots of different variations depending on which country you're from.
Yes. In fact, it just so happens that I had a class a couple of days ago, and it was incredible the amount of variety of different types of English that had to be covered in that class because it was about fashion. And I was teaching words like, of course, trousers. But I had to immediately say that don't expect anybody to say trousers, pantalones, to you in America. They're not going to. They're going to say pants. But if somebody says pants to you in the UK, they're talking about your underwear.
Exactly.
So totally different use of the same word, or one word which is used in one country but it's not used in another. And the pronunciation, of course, is very different in general. I'm not talking about just accent, but I'm talking about actual pronunciation. Most British people say the word aluminium, something like aluminium, more or less. Depends if you're Scottish, English, Irish, whatever, but aluminium. Whereas in America, it's aluminum, right?
Yep.
The stress totally changes. So that's not just a question of accent. It's a question of pronunciation. Very different stuff. And even between England and Ireland, this is true, Craig. It just so happens that in a class a couple of days ago, we were talking about fashion, and we were talking about that very famous store spelt Primark.
Primark.
Yep. Or as my Spanish students said, Primark. But guess what? I agree with them. I say Primark.
Do you?
Yeah, because everybody in Ireland does. Bizarre, eh?
Yeah.
That really well-known store, everybody that I've ever met from Ireland says Primark, but everybody else in the English-speaking world seems to say Primark. It's weird, isn't it? Who would imagine the name of a company? How could there be two different pronunciations of that? But there are. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, and it goes back to what we said before. I think you just have to learn how people are speaking where you are in different parts of the world. You have to be aware of how people are speaking and try to integrate and fit in as best as you can.
And of course, in no other area is that more difficult than when it comes to accents. So one thing is pronunciation, Primark, Primark. Okay, I can say both. In my accent, I can say Primark, I can say Primark. But a different thing is accent compared to pronunciation. For example, an American voice can easily be identified as an American voice. It's not because of pronunciation, it's because of accent. So accent is the way you say things, not individual sounds, but the whole music of your voice, let's say. So, as you know, to make a fool of myself, a ver si puedo volver a este acento extremeño que usaba este año para hablar español. Whenever I first arrived in Spain, I went to Extremadura, or as I prefer to say, Extremadura. And there, like in Andalusia, people eat a lot of the consonants. They just don't say them. And the final S disappears. So it's not a question of pronunciation. It's a question of accent. So Andaluz, or should I say Andalou? These are different accents even within the same country. And in a class, you can hear some different accents, but really to experience a good wide range, you've just got to go out there and speak to people, travel, go to places, and meet people with different accents.
And of course, listen to songs, watch films, documentaries, try to extend your exposure to as many different Englishes as possible, different types of English. That includes TV series, different news and blog websites and video channels. Even gaming, you get different accents and different types of English when you play video games, different literature, go to meetups and homestays overseas when we can travel again. Make sure you get out there and visit different parts of the world where English is spoken and get used to different accents from around the world. There's one final thing you added, Reza, that I wanted to ask you about, which is not often or hardly ever, especially in my classes, practiced in the classroom. How to flirt. First of all, what does flirt mean?
To flirt is to be coquettish. The Spanish speakers will understand that, coquetear or flirtear, to flirt. So whenever you're speaking in a way that suggests that you like someone as more than a friend.
Do you teach that in your classes?
No, I don't. And I've never, ever come across a lesson anywhere in any book that does it. Have you?
No, because usually books go to different markets, don't they? You might get English books in countries like India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, many strict Muslim countries where obviously flirting and doing things outside of marriage and relationship is definitely taboo. So the publishing houses are very, very strict on the material in the books, and flirting is never taught in the classroom. Do you think it's important how to flirt?
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, I think it's very important. But you know what? Maybe that can't be taught even outside the classroom. Some people are better at it than others. I'm not very good at it. I'm very jealous of people who are. So if you want to get good at it in another language, perhaps like me, observe other people who are good at it, doing it, and try to learn from them.
Yeah.
Although, don't do what I did. I mean, set reasonable goals. Don't watch a James Bond film and think, okay, that's all I have to do and it'll work. Not exactly. When I went to my local bingo hall thinking that I was in the casino in Monte Carlo. And I said, yeah, vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. It didn't have the same effect as 007, strangely enough. I didn't get any girls coming over to me.
Surprise, surprise. If you are interested in that kind of thing, we have done an episode on romantic body language that might interest you. Go to inglespodcast.com/243. Also, we've looked at body language in general. That was in episode 238. So go to inglespodcast.com/238 for more information there.
Craig, there is one more thing. If your flirtation is successful, unlike me, if you're good at it, that might lead to the final element, which is pillow talk. What's that?
Pillow talk. Well, pillow in Spanish is almohada. So the conversation you have after sex. When you're laying there, relaxing, what do you say? I don't say anything.
Well, yeah, possibly. But,
Maybe I say, I think it's time we painted this ceiling.
something which clearly cannot be taught in a class. But have you noticed, listeners, that, people do speak in a different way when it's pillow talk after an intimate situation? People speak differently. There's certain things they say or a certain way of speaking that they would not do in any other situation. You can't learn that in a class. Cannot be done.
How do you think it's different?
People might use silly little pet names. Like, I don't know, in Spanish, people might say, "Oh, ¿qué tal mi bichito?" or something like that. You wouldn't normally call someone bichito, would you? But if you've just had a very intimate experience with them, it sounds kind of cute. It's friendly. It's nice. It's cariñoso. It's affectionate. But only in that context you can get away with it. To get away with something means you do something and no one's going to criticize you. It doesn't sound stupid in that situation. But if you did it in another situation, you'd seem ridiculous.
Yeah, if you were shopping, buying a new shirt, you wouldn't say it to the shop assistant, for example. Now it's your turn to practice your English. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to get in touch, we do like it when you send us voice messages because we hear your voice, it's more personal, and we feel like we're getting to know you. So to send us a message, go to SpeakPipe, that's speakpipe.com/inglespodcast, or send us an email to me, Craig, at inglespodcast.com, or to Reza@belfastreza@gmail.com.
And also, if you're looking for extra material, there's a whole load of stuff if you go to store.mansioningles.net. You can find ebooks, you can find text, you can find audio. Check it out. See what you think.
Thank you very much to all of you who are helping us on Patreon by supporting this podcast. You can see a list of our wonderful sponsors over at patreon.com/Ingles Podcast. And our new supporters who have joined us this month are Rox Col, thank you very much, Soledad Alcaraz Plaza, Maria E. Gonzalez, and Fran Lopez. Thank you very much for joining our group of Patreons. If you would like to join these lovely people for as little as $1 per month, you can get instant access to recent transcriptions. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/Ingles Podcast. What's next week, Reza?
On next week's episode, we've got the expressions. Having said that, as a matter of fact, in fact, instead of, and rather than.
And more of your feedback and questions. Thanks so much for being part of our podcast and for listening this week. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.